Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Just want to make sure we are live. Welcome to Cultivating Resilience through Community. My name is Aaron Craig Mitchell, and I'm happy to have you joining me here today. This was sort of an impromptu LinkedIn Live session that just came out of what felt like a need. Been speaking to a lot of people who've just been having a hard time lately, having a hard time, whether it's work life, things in between. And what I noticed is a lot of folks just were doing it by themselves. They're isolated, they're not engaging with people in those work environments, in their personal life. They're dealing with tragedies, they're dealing with grief, they're dealing with things that maybe they haven't dealt before or they haven't dealt with at this magnitude. And in my own personal journey and my own personal experiences, I have found that being connected to people, being part of a community has just been an important part of my getting through. And instead of just having these conversations one on one, wanted to create a space and an environment for everybody to really hear different versions of what that's meant, to hear some tips and tricks on how to do it for themselves, but really, and most importantly, just as an opportunity to create some community. Now, LinkedIn Live is not the easiest way to do that, but what I've done is I've tried to invite some members of my own community, old and new, to join me on the call as well, so that I can share different versions. Good morning, Melissa. How you doing? Haven't seen you in forever. Um, for those who are joining, please feel free to use the chat. I will see your chats come through the screen. Um, if you have questions, if you have comments, if you have experiences that you want to share, please do use the chat. It'll be up on the screen the entire time for me, so can pull you into the conversation. And just talking through some of the objectives before I start to invite some of these folks onto the screen. But I really want folks to walk away not only with a greater sense of tools and tips that they need to navigate what's just been a challenging world as of late, but also to connect with other folks that might be going through similar things, to hear from folks who've navigated similar things, and to build on to your community. Because anybody who thinks they can do this by themselves, I commend you, but I don't believe you, because I haven't been able to do it by myself, and anybody, the strongest people in my life, have not been able to do it by themselves. So we're going to get started here. I'm going to do this. And I've told the friends that I had joining, like, I think some of y'all know I'm a jazz musician. If you didn't know, this is my saxophone teacher up above, a super important part of my community. And I want to invite some of the folks that I've been speaking to, building community with, to come in and share their own stories, share their own challenges, and share how they've navigated those things. I'll tell a little bit about my own sort of personal challenges, and I mentioned it in the video, in the invitation. 2022 was a really crappy year. The year started off kind of rocky, but things were going all right, right? Like, it started off rocky in that, like, I thought I was going to get big VP promotion, and then it didn't happen, and was in my feelings about it a little bit, but got over it because good friends of mine were like, look, don't let that define you. You're amazing. Let's go. Then March rolls around. My brother-in-law dies suddenly. And my brother-in-law and my wife were best friends. And so his death was not just like a man that's rough. It was like somebody ripped the hearts out of, like, the entire family. And then 2 weeks after that, my youngest daughter was diagnosed with autism. And we hadn't even figured out how to even plan for the funeral and weren't even in the grieving process. Of course, the kids were affected because favored uncle. Um, and so we're dealing with that, dealing with the additional grief, then dealing with the fact that a couple of weeks after that, my father, who had been battling cancer all of 2021, beat cancer, has a heart attack, in and out of the hospital with complications. All this is happening while work is the most intense it's ever been, talking about layoffs and show shutdowns and just political bureaucratic nonsense at a extra level. And like I said, it was rough. It was rough. And I want to fast forward because I don't want this to be about the hard stuff. And the hard stuff was enough that I didn't realize how much it had broken me until I had enough time and enough space and enough clarity out of it. But the reason that while it broke me, it didn't completely destroy me was because I had a whole bunch of people. One, I was being vulnerable with, I was sharing these stories with, and I had them available to me to be like, okay, here's what you can do, or here's who you should talk to. I think early on in the process of things that were going wrong, Renee Myers, who was the chief diversity officer at Netflix, I'm telling her this stuff like, how do you do this work where you care and you want to do all this stuff around equity and not let it break you? And she's like, maybe get a therapist and read this book. I read the book first. It took me a little while to get a therapist because I'm a Black man and I had a whole bunch of stigmas against why I was too strong and didn't need a therapist, that I eventually got through because I had a crew of 3 Black men from in different levels of corporate America who all had therapists who were all, you know, as masculine as men are. And we're like, man, get yourself a therapist. Why are you playing around? Like, you need a therapist. And I'm like, do I need a therapist? Everybody needs a therapist. So you need a therapist. And so once I was able to talk myself out of my lack of intelligence on the topic, got a therapist. And that was one of the most important sort of reinforcing mechanisms. So when things got really bad, I broke but didn't fall to pieces because I had somebody to talk to. I had somebody to reinforce positive thoughts and positive um, ideas. And all of this led to being able to rebuild myself over time. And then being able to say and reflect back with those folks like, oh yeah, we told you was broken. Remember that thing we said when you lost all that weight and you looked like Skeletor? We wasn't joking with you. You were emaciated. You looked like you were sick. You might have had, we thought something was wrong. We told you. And it's like, yeah, you did tell me. And maybe that's the thing that got me to do the thing that got me to do the thing that eventually helped me get out of the hole. And it's been a gift to me. It's been a gift to my survival. And I wanted to use this thing as a stage because I hear people all the time tell me, oh, you're doing so well, or this or that. And a lot of people don't see what's happening behind the curtain. And I don't want to feel like I'm being dishonest about what I'm presenting, because it's the stuff that's happening behind the curtain that makes the stuff in front of the curtain so much more meaningful. But I also didn't want to center on my own experience, because my experience is very, it's a very specific experience that is my life, that is my journey, and there's a lot of luck involved. But my luck has been different from different folks' luck. And so I've invited 3 gentlemen that I've met in the last few years, new friends, all from different walks of life, different experiences, um, different superpowers, because I wanted them to share some of their challenges, some of their um, epiphanies, and then I want to open it up to really hear what's on your mind as an audience, because LinkedIn Live has some limitations, and I would much rather have done this as an open, session where I could see everybody's faces. But as a starting point, at least sharing some of these ideas so that all of you feel like maybe there's somebody who has something in common with your experience, who can speak to some of your challenges, but also a few of these individuals are also mental health professionals, are not only have had these life experiences, but also have the skills, the credentials, the credibility to help you through that and to be a part of that additional or extended community. So the first brother I'm gonna invite up is a gentleman by the name of Joe Corley. Joe and I met just a few days ago, but I feel like we have likely been on this journey and this road for quite some time now. So Joe, welcome to Cultivating Resilience Through Community. Now, I'm saying that like it's a show. It's not a show. It's just conversation. But thank you so much for joining. I'm so glad we met just a few days ago, and I feel like that conversation of 2.5 hours was really like we were living each other's lives. And so wanted to invite you to the stage to share a little bit about yourself, what you're doing, but then about your journey and really how you've cultivated that resilience and the role community has played in that.
First, thanks for having me. Appreciate the opportunity to share some of my story here today, and hopefully provide uh, something valuable to the conversation. Um, just a quick little something about me. And I was an educator for over a decade, middle school, um, and probably in the last 3 or 4 years, I converted to become a therapist. So I've been practicing, seeing clients for about 3 years. So it's still a little early in my career, but I mean that's thousands and thousands of hours. Mainly, what I do is, I see individuals, couples, parent-child relationships, situations where we're trying to heal from some of those uh, traumas and things that have happened in early in life. And my mental health journey began with me breaking down. I mean, it really. I mean, that's there's no way to other way to put it. I broke down and ended up, in a situation where I spent 10 days in an inpatient facility, and was almost, you could pretty much say. I mean, well, I checked myself in there because I knew I needed to be there. But what I didn't know when I checked myself in was that you can't check yourself out. So, to be honest, had I probably known that, I probably never even would have began the journey.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So once you're in there, then the decision to leave is not in your hands anymore because you pretty much admitted that you're a danger to yourself. So, and long story short, that put me on a healing journey, and then healing is painful in the beginning because you're opening up parts of yourself and wounds that you have, most of them you don't even know exist. And but when you start to actually, open those wounds, uh, that can begin the process of healing those same wounds. And me observing that and going through that process myself, I said, okay, well, um, you know, I was a pretty good teacher. I'm being modest. I was a really good teacher. Okay, and I was a
Boost
really
yourself
good
up.
teacher because yeah, yeah, I was a really good teacher, and because I was a really good teacher because of my, gift of empathy. And so I said, let's translate, see if this translates into another profession. And so the I moved forward with becoming a therapist, and because it filled a hole in my life, and I wanted to see if I can do that for others. So um, that's pretty much a synopsis on, where I'm at with it right now. Not
Thank you
sure
for
I
that,
answered your
Joe.
question.
No, thank you
Hmm.
so much. And after I get Corey and Salathiel up here, we're going to turn this into a broader discussion because I think you know it's rare to have And I personally don't know many Black male mental health professionals. And a lot of that is, the stigma we have in the community, but also just like discussing mental health openly is a fairly new phenomenon, I think, for a lot of people, and especially for Black folks. And so, thank you for just sharing the story and the challenges. Not an easy thing to do in open, especially. I'm not sure yet how many people are on the chat, but more than a few. So
Yeah,
thank you.
no problem. Appreciate you
All right,
giving me the opportunity.
Corey, if you are there, let me go ahead and pull you up. Hold on one second. How you doing, sir?
Hi, how you doing, Aaron?
I'm doing well.
Yes, yes. First of all, thank you for having this discussion, this forum. It's so necessary because I think there are a lot of conversations that aren't being had surrounding creativity, mental health, uh, building our own table, so to speak. Um, and it's interesting because when you hear somebody else's story, there's so many parts that serendipitously kind of align with yours. So you have to take the time to explore it, and that's what the story is there for. Um, and what I mean is specifically with Joe having that moment of just breakdown. And I am an artist. I've been a performer with musical theater, TV, film, transition to writing and directing and choreographing, and I have so many artistic intersections that I possess. And I've spent a lot of time developing my craft. And as artists, you tend to put your heart and your soul into your work. And I had a moment. And this was during the pandemic where I I think I had given this is maybe the fourth writer notes on their scripts. I used to do coverage for studios and agents and things like that. And based on the notes that I gave them, they adjusted their sample and they all got into, different writers' rooms. And it was almost like, if you know the reference, Joseph interpreting the dreams for other people. And I'm like, when is it going to be my turn? And there were several moments. If I could write a book about my time in LA, it would be called Almost, because there were several moments where I almost got this, I almost got that, I almost got this, and uh, I value hard work and I value excellence.
Mhm.
And I had a moment where I was like, this shit's for the birds. I can't do this anymore. And it was starting to affect my mental health.
Mhm.
Um, and then I stopped and I said, I feel like if I'm going through this right now, especially as a Black individual, I know that there are other people going through this as well. So when I originally went back to school, right now I'm getting my master's in clinical mental health counseling. Um, and I went back with the purpose of serving three communities. First and foremost, the Black community, because there's so much intergenerational trauma. And speaking specifically about Black men, men in general, we're told, if you can do it alone, you are a man.
Mhm.
However, that is the antithesis of humanity. We're
Right.
social creatures. We were built to connect. In fact, with the Harvard the grant study at Harvard, um, they discovered that in order to live a long and happy life, it wasn't genetics, it wasn't nutrition, it wasn't exercise, it was actually the quality of your relationships. So it makes sense that once you connected with people, Aaron, that's when things started to shift with you. That's when
Mhm. Mhm.
same with you, Joe. Um, so we're taught to isolate ourselves and to be isolated, and plus society isolates us into a different category. So the Black community is one of those resources, those communities. Um, the LGBTQ plus community is one of those, and also the entertainment community, because I think about acting and how that affects the brain. Um, so the statistic for when I found out doing my research for Black therapists in the field in general, 5.1% of therapists are Black.
Oh wow.
Of that percent, 1% is male. So, Joe, you and I are, it's rare. But when you connect it with creativity, in order for you to be creative, we all have something to express. But the only way to access that part of our brains is if we are calm, if we have those positive emotions flowing, if we aren't experiencing negative stress, if we aren't in a place where we feel isolated, afraid, angry, that's when the creativity comes. But if you're not taking care of your mental health and you're not building that resilience in order to make it through those situations, you can't access that creativity. And that's just the way that our brains are wired. So resilience and creativity, it goes hand in hand, and a part of the resilience is taking care of who you are mentally. Um, Connection is so important, and creating is not an isolated thing. It's not a solitary thing.
Mhm.
We reflect back in our art what the world um, could be, should be, and is. You know, um, artists are the storytellers. We're the people that advance society. Everything that you have is built on story. The chair, somebody sat in the room and designed it in a specific way. A television, gardens, cars. When you look around, nothing would exist without story being communicated.
Mhm.
So I'm happy that this conversation is being had, and for so long we've tried to fit into a space that wasn't necessarily built for us. And I think the same goes for different marginalized groups. So in general, as humans, we need to be taking better care of each other. But in order to do that, we need to be taking better care of ourselves. Um, and the last thing I'll say is I a couple months ago was hired as a writer and a research assistant for the world's first mental health app for men. Um, because when you think about self harm, men make up about 50% of the population, but account for 80% of suicide related deaths. In that, Black males between the age of 10 and 19, the percentage of suicides has increased by 60% just in the last 2 decades alone.
Thanks.
And Black males between the age of 10 and 19 are 2 times more likely than white males to commit suicide. So there's a lot coming just as a human. Forget being an artist, forget being assigned, insert name of job here. Just walking out of your door and existing every day, the stats and the odds are, stacked. But I do feel like we can change that with one, having more conversations like this, and then two, providing those resources and giving people the language in order to express how they're feeling, and then also giving them the tools.
Corey, damn, thank you.
Mm.
More than I expected, but not surprised at all. And of course, I'm gonna take you off camera, but you will be back because I think that you know I have lots more questions. Just because this is a lot of this information is things that I've felt and experienced but did not know.
Mhm.
Um, and specifically around creativity, because I think you and I share a lot of disparate interests. I'm curious, and I'll just ask this question and we'll come back to it later, but like, how the hell are all of these groups you mentioned so creative if the conditions you mentioned are required for creativity like just don't exist, like calm and peace and this and like I'm like, wait, what? That's what's required? Then how? So I'm gonna leave that with you because
Mhm.
inquiring minds want to know.
Yeah, there's an answer, and I'll give it to you when we circle back.
All right, all right, all right. So Theo,
Hello, hello.
how's it going,
How are
man?
you? Man,
Doing
I'm
well.
blessed. How are you? How about, yes, brother? How about yourself? I'm blessed.
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. So in the same format, man, just wanting to hear, who are you? What are you doing? And then what's your journey on cultivating resilience through community? Because I know, based on the conversations that we've had, you getting to where you are right now has required an amount of resilience that I don't even know I personally have ever experienced. And so I want you to tell the people your story, and if you feel so inclined, there's a spoken word piece you delivered to me when we first had that first conversation, and I think it might actually be applicable to this discussion if you feel so inclined.
Okay. It's crazy because I can't even remember the first poem I did. I don't remember which poem I did, but it'll come to mind. How you all doing? My name is Sandithio Perez. I am, first of all, like a lot of you brothers, I've also, been inclined to have to run into some obstacles that a lot of other ethnicities might not have to run into. A lot of things are not in your way, or if they are in their way, they got to go so far out of their way to hit these obstacles and in they were readily available for me. They were at the playground. They were at the different situations. However, I'm from Chicago, Illinois, and I'm 46 years old. At the age of 16, I gave a guy a gun, and he used it in an offense. And I ended up spending 20 years of my life down. So yeah, and anyway, while I was incarcerated, man, I kind of feel like I took a therapist class, because the one obstacle that you face in prison is that you are always thrown into a different situation. You don't know who your next roommate is going to be. You don't know what drives them. You don't know if they're going to be a serial killer. You don't know if they're going to have, whatever childhood issues they've been dealt with. You don't. It's not like as I guess it'll be akin to going to college and being placed into situations where you forced to live with different illnesses, not illnesses in a bad way, because I believe we all have what would be considered a mental illness. And using some term, I'm sure we could find a term to fit some of the things that each one of us have going on. But inside of that, but growing up, well, first of all, let's rewind. Growing up, I found myself involved in gangs, in a gang, and not just involved in gang, not just involved in the gang, also involved in gang activity. And I think when I look back now, I've never been the person to need help as far as getting into problems. I just always felt the need to, like you say, to associate. So, but what helped me, once I got, and that same need is what drove me and put me in position to end up encountering an individual while I was incarcerated. I was inside, I was in an organization, I was in a gang, and I was having a conversation with some guys. We were outside in the hallway talking. And while we were talking in the hall, a brother, man.
I still have you?
I don't know if my phone is acting foolish. I don't know what's going on.
Your phone doesn't want you to share your phone doesn't want you to share this wisdom.
Yeah. Yeah. So I ended up, a brother came out and he was speaking to me. And like you all, I don't open up to people. Especially in prison, I felt like here goes somebody getting in my business. And you don't want to open up to them. So once I was able to sit down, a brother by the name of Josh, we call him Fly. And I was able to sit down and talk to him. As he started talking, to be perfectly honest, he started talking to me about the Bible. But he talked to me about the Bible in a different way than I had been talked to about the Bible prior conversations prior conversations to. So he gave me he started helping me to identify with the Bible, as opposed to teaching me the religious side of the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
He taught me the actual relate where I relate in the Bible, where the Bible relates to my life.
Mm-hmm.
Once I was able to get that understanding and me and him sat down, then I started going out. Then it allowed me to open up because now I got with my understanding of the Bible, I started not with my understanding of the Bible, with my understanding that I needed help because I started getting into the Bible. I started and I needed a different circle. I needed a different set of people to communicate with that would drive my mind, that would pull my mind into the directions that it needed to go, as opposed to the conversation I was having in the hall. Mind you, the conversation I was having in the hallway was a positive one from my perspective. But the people that I was talking to, I wasn't reaching them because I was coming at them from a different perspective. So once I sat down and I started talking to, like I said, different people, and I got in these groups where it where we started meeting up on the yard and different things. And now I got brothers that I can relate to, who can relate to where I come, what I feel and what I think. And like I said, my understanding of the Bible started to allow me to understand, like kind of like the brother said about Joseph, kind of allowed me to understand that I had a purpose outside of just serving time. Like Joseph, I was there. I had been sold into the system by my brothers, and I had an obligation. Once my people came there, they were starved. There was no information for you when you got there. Kind of like when Israel went to Egypt. There was no place of refuge for brothers to come to when they came in there. So I became brothers' place of refuge. I became the storehouse of food that brothers needed when they came, because a lot of brothers didn't have it. There was no word. It was darkness. So, and I realized they needed it, and I became the venting place. I had to open myself up to allow myself to become the venting place, because I realized, man, a lot of brothers just want to be talked to. A lot of brothers just have a lot of things pent up. I had another conversation that I was going to speak about, but this is where I was driven to go. I was going to speak about the time that I almost lost my mind while I was in there, when I know that it was a clear decision made on that day. When something in my head was telling me to do something that my heart knew that that's not what I do. I don't, that's not what you need to be doing. I was going to have that conversation, and we might have that later, but I took over enough of your time. But
now,
that,
but what are you doing now? Because
oh, okay.
20 years in prison and in a system, honestly, as far as I can tell, that is designed to break the soul, the spirit, the mind, everything in between, and you are not broken.
Oh no, I have been. I had to be broken to get to where I'm at. I had to literally let go and let God. I had to literally do it. I had to literally let Yahweh take control of my life. I am the executive director of ECCSC, which is Ex-Cons for Community and Social Change. We are a nonprofit organization that believes that felon doesn't make you a failure. Being a felon doesn't make you a failure, and that we can come back into our community and be positive members, not just ex-cons. We can actually be assets to our community. I'm also the director, so the CEO and founder of BASS, which is Book and Street Smart Organization. And BASS is a community-based group that is, our goal is to rebuild, re-educate, redefine, and to reintroduce our people to a community of understanding, to a community of growth, to a community of life, and a community of sharing, like the village aspect, because this conversation we're having right now is needed. People need to have a place where they could go to talk to people. Also, is ironically, we actually, starting September the 6th, we're going to be hosting we have a program from ECCSC titled Phoenix, which is a group where ex-cons is able to meet. We're coming together. I'm putting together a group where ex-cons is able to come in, get the resources and the vent, and to have sounding boards for issues that they're running to, when they get out of prison, that a lot of people who've never been to prison wouldn't even understand is a real issue. It seems so minor to some people. But, for example, here, you not having a job is one thing, but not having a job and having to worry about going back to jail is something different. When you get out of jail here in Mississippi, it's $53 a month. If you don't have a job, how are you going to pay it? So people coming out of prison already immediately have an instant, I got to get some money, because if not, $53 don't seem much to somebody, but that $53 keeps somebody on the streets, as opposed to, but like, again, the name of the group is Phoenix, and we're looking to launch it on September the 6th here in Mississippi. It's going to be a group where ex-cons that are able to come in. We have a smorgasbord of people for them to talk to. I just been blessed enough to have a bunch of counselor friends, a bunch of friends that are in the medical field, far as therapists and stuff like that. My board, my board members, and man, we're looking to help some brothers to start opening up so that we could grow, so that we can learn, and that's the aim and the goal.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm studying.
No.
I'm sitting in my car.
It's all good. And I appreciate you being able to join, and I appreciate what you've added to the conversation. I'm gonna bring Joe and Corey back now. And I'd love to, take some questions from folks on the chat. What's on your mind? What's on your heart? Please add it to the conversation so that we can make this fruitful. But, it sounds, I'd love to just ask, what role has vulnerability played in your ability to cultivate that resilience? Because, Salithio, you mentioned specifically, it wasn't until you started like opening up that you felt like you were able to start to heal. But like, yeah. What did that take? Because opening up is just not something that we're not necessarily taught that.
Well, from my perspective, it took for me to understand that, man, I'm an ingredient in the pie. I'm not the whole pie. I'm not the whole pie. I'm an ingredient in the pie. And that means that it's going to take a whole bunch of us and a whole bunch of people to get where we at. Once I started understanding that it take a whole lot of things to come together to make up something. Like I said, again, the Bible, for me, I looked at the Bible as a life of a man. So I looked at Moses as the stage of at some point of a life of a man, not just him, of any man, any woman. Same thing with Joseph, same thing with Yahshua, we call Jesus. I looked at them as stages of life inside of people, and I realized all of those things came together to make up a man. And it's the same thing in us building, the same thing in us growing. In order for us to grow, we got to come together. I got to be able to scrub up against some stuff so I could get the garbage off of me, because I don't see it. But you might see it, so you're able to help me shake it off. And I didn't understand that at first. Once I got that understanding, it allowed me to get out of my gang. It allowed me to get out of my gang while I was in prison. I walked away from my gang because I understood that I had a community much bigger, and that my gang only allowed me to see what views that we had inside of our circle. So I was able to expand out, and it made me a greater person today, because now I got a much bigger gang. I got a whole bunch of people from a whole bunch of different places in all parts of the world. And I think that built me up, because I realized, okay, man, with help, this gonna be nasty. It's just like, when we was growing up, you see the black fist, and what people don't understand is this they were showing you this good, but this is much, 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 much more powerful. And once I got that concept on it, it built up resilience. It allowed me to understand that I become stronger with people. I don't become weaker. I become stronger because people are able to pour in me. the same as I'm able to pour in them.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that
Joe, it looked like that struck a chord, and I know we talked about this just the other day. Oops.
Yeah, man. It definitely struck a chord. You know, when I went into that institution, I was in there with all different kinds of people. And at first I was, it's just like you see on TV, man. I was like, oh man, why did I sign up? I mean, it was people, in the corner shaking, and just what you see on TV, what you would think you see inside of a mental institution. But there was also, was a sister there who was a lawyer who was just burnt out. There was a guy who was there who was just, somebody had, some football team had raped his daughter. So he had a psychotic break and was here. I mean, it was all kinds of people in there, and we all were forced to be in, you had to do group twice a day. You had to do group sessions. And it was in there that I learned that, okay, I'm not alone. So, when you were saying earlier about, being a black man and the stigmas and all of that, I didn't want to talk. So I didn't talk for the first couple of days. But then I started recognizing that, everybody's in here dealing with something. And, and when I started to talk, that vulnerability was where I started to feel better, and I didn't mention this earlier. I mean, hey, we talked about it the other day. The reason I couldn't teach anymore is because, I was indicted for crimes I didn't commit. And I only, had it took 5 years to get my day in court. And only a month ago did I get the not guilties that allowed me to even get back into my life. So, I didn't go into prison, but I spent 5 years facing 60 years and was scared to death. I was scared to death that whole time, and I'm still, even like I said, it was just a month ago. I had two trials this year alone. First one ended in a hung jury, and the second one, I got my not guilties finally, and I'm still dealing with some of the PTSD that comes with facing those type of charges and facing that type of time, and then losing my career and having to start over, in my early 40s. And in that time, I watched a lot of people walk away from me, and I watched a lot of people switch up on me, and what I learned was that when you become vulnerable and you start connecting with, I always tell clients that, this is who you want to be, and this is who this is who you're pretending to be. This is the mask you're wearing. And as far as the further these two things get apart is where all the depression, anxiety, and, all the room that comes in for, the mental health breakdowns. And the closer these two things get together, the more healed you become. So that's where vulnerability comes in. The more vulnerable you are, the more you realize that, your authentic self can get closer to, the self that you're presenting out in the world, and you will have peace. And that only comes with vulnerability. And I learned that, by watching people. I asked myself, well, why are these people who I loved and trusted and thought were in this with me, why are they walking away? Well, because when I started presenting them the most authentic version of myself, I started recognizing, I have to make adjustments to, the relationships now that they are seeing me present who I really am. Now I have to make adjustments to how they want to react to the most authentic version of myself. And then you become okay with, people walking away from you, because if you have to, again, separate these two things in order to keep certain people in your life, then you just, like I said, making room for mental breakdowns. Mm-hmm. So I say all that to say, I have a whole podcast called Vulnerability is the New Sexy. Whole podcast, vulnerability. Yeah, my whole that's it. My whole podcast is centered around, you know, that premise, you know, and I salute you, brother, Salithio, man. I appreciate you opening it up, man. As you see, when I gave my intro, I'm still struggling to even talk about, just facing the charges, and hearing you tell your story so openly gave me a little bit of power. So I appreciate you, brother.
Same here. And man, thank you for sharing too. For real, honestly.
Thank both of y'all, because I mean, that the vulnerability is the new sexy, or vulnerability is a strength. I think there's still people out there that are like, man, nah, y'all
Sound
soft,
soft.
right? Y'all soft, right? Like, and it's like, how can we begin to even heal when the thing that gives us strength is stigmatized, right? And we know better, but we don't always do better, because to your point earlier, Salithio, like, if your gang, the crew that you have, is all like, nah, that's not how we roll, and you can't find the people who value that thing, what do? Right? I mean, and I think part of that is we do this, right? And that's why I wanted the diversity of backgrounds and experiences on this call, so that people could see four very different stories, four very different existences. And that same thing that we're doing with vulnerability is allowing us to create community with each other in ways that, like, this sort of foursome on screen is not like the typical, like, podcast or LinkedIn live situation. Like, this is not what people think community is, but this is what community has always been for me. And I can draw from, my artists, I have a number of friends and loved ones that are felons, and, like, I've never seen them, to your point, felon doesn't mean failure, right? That's just a circumstance in life, depending, right? There's some people I don't talk to, right? There is definitely discernment. And so I appreciate you all for not only sharing your story, but sharing the depth of it, because I think that will help other people think about how they build and see their community. Corey, um, saving you for, and I know just based on your own experiences and creativity, I'm curious. Bring us home.
Yeah. First of all, Celestio and Joe, like, truly your stories are the cornerstone for change. I think, there's power in saying things aloud, and there's power in connection. And I think what finding a space where you can feel safe is very, very important. And for Black individuals, specifically Black men as well, that space isn't necessarily as readily available. So your stress response system is constantly firing all of these, like, your cortisol, your norepinephrine, to keep you at a state of fight, flight, or whatever it is, to survival mode. We're constantly in survival mode, so that does shut down parts of who we are. You think about how do we connect with people with vulnerability, and I think about perception, and I think about perspective. Perception is based on how you feel about the reality. Perspective is based on the actual information that is there. So if people will walk around with perspective and go, oh, actually, I do need to be vulnerable, versus their perception of, like, vulnerability is soft. We can't do that work for them. And just like you had to do, Joe, and pivot, you have to pivot. And a lot of times we make room for people because they're our dad, because they're our mom, because they're, because of title. But a person's title doesn't give them permission to be toxic in your life. So when you start to change, people start to attach to a specific version of you, um, and it's different from what you're presenting now. And so then you both have a choice. Do do I pivot to maintain that version that they have, or do I say, "Hey, thanks for playing, but I'm going this way, you going that way. It was fun ride while it lasted, but I gotta go. I got some growth to do." Um, so I think a part of that vulnerability uh, is found in the safety of allowing of you being connected with people that allow you to grow. Um, Vulnerability is like that emotional state of exposure to a degree of uncertainty. You don't know what's going to happen when you're vulnerable. You don't know if somebody's going to accept it. You don't know if they're going to hold it. You don't know if they're going to look at it, look at you sideways. So there's a little bit of risk there. And I think that's why a lot of people avoid vulnerability, because they're afraid of what will happen if they are vulnerable. If I do cry in front of you, if I do express how angry this made me feel, if I do express how sad, if I'm still grieving over something that happened, however many years ago. Um, so there's power again, Joe, with the confession, Slathio with the confession of just talking and being like, hey, brother to brother, I got you, Um, and it also involves our willingness not only to love, but to be loved. A lot of us don't know what that feels like. We don't know what it feels
Mm.
like to have somebody wrap their arms around us and just let us collapse and fall apart. Um, but once that stuff is out, you can connect with, the creativity. But that's a part of the resilience journey. Going back to what you had asked earlier, how then are people so creative if we need to, have all these conditions? Um, when we're born as people, uh, we're automatically developing a worldview, and that worldview comes from a connection with mom, with the mother. Most moms carry their babies on the left side because the part of the brain that is responsible for processing connection, the oxytocin, that kind of thing, is on that side. So when she's looking at the baby to the left, the brain is being activated. This is why the eye to eye contact, the skin to skin contact, holding the child, that kind of thing. If a mom's nervous system is stressed, she passes that on to the kid. That comes from a mother not having the resources she needs in order to provide for the child. So paternity leave, especially in the Black community, mom got to go back to work, you know. But those people are innately, they become more creative because they have to be to shift, but their lives are shorter. Their blood pressure is higher. They have more anxiety. You think about all these things in the Black community, these medical conditions that we're predisposed to before we're even born and make choices of our own. That changes us, our genetics, So the creativity is there, but it's creativity to escape and not creativity to provide. Um, so that's why when you see it, think about Black culture, we bring culture, fashion, music, art, writing, like it's everywhere, and it's because it's
A trauma
it's in the,
response?
yeah.
Trauma
and
response. That's
and
exactly
what
what it is.
yeah and what people don't realize, they go, oh, not everything is a
Man.
trauma, but when you're a Black individual, when you come out of the womb, that's already there. You are possessing your grandmothers, who's possessing her grandmothers. It's passed down from generation to generation. The wonderful thing about it is, the hopeful thing about it is, and the thing that I love about it is, all of our brains are plastic, which means we can change the way that our genetics are passed down. But that takes a lot of effort. It takes time, and this shit is hard. It's hard. It's uncomfortable because nobody. It physically hurts. Certain parts of our body are activated there, but it is possible. And if you're willing to endure the pain and the uncomfortability right now that it takes in order for you to change perspective, you literally can change the generations after you. So it's 100% possible for all those things to happen, and for us to create, just because we are relaxed. The goal isn't to make art. The goal is to handle the feelings that stop us from making art, and to embrace the feelings that we to embrace the feelings that will put us in a position to be free, feel free enough to make it. We all have something to say. We all have a book inside of us. We all have a podcast. You know, we all have a group that we want to start to help other people. But we'll never get there if we don't come into the freedom that's that it's an option for us. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Like
Mhm.
if you've been on one path for 40 years, there's probably nowhere in 6 months all that's going to be undone. You know, be patient with yourself, love yourself, be kind to yourself, and also at the same time push yourself. Like I said before, I don't. I've started to remove the word balance from my vocabulary and start to embrace the word harmony, because there's a flow that we have, and some days are going to be different than others, you know, but that doesn't mean that you have fallen back. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person. You just have to make sure that we are speaking about vulnerability. You know, your healing, what happened to us is not our fault, but our healing is our responsibility. And while we have to be the ones to heal, we can't heal alone.
Mhm.
We need other people. So the biggest takeaway from anything, if you hear anything from this, is find those positive social circles, be of service in those circles, and then also allow yourself to be imparted into, because it's a two-way street.
Thank you so much for that, Corey. And that there was so much in that, and I realize, and I love when I get to the end of a conversation where I'm like, man, we did not book enough time, because we haven't even begun to scratch the surface on, I think, what is necessary, the sort of the prerequisites, the preconditions, you know, the different twists and turns that life really takes on us. And, you know, because here's the thing, right? We all, every single human being on this planet has come through and has inherited some crazy traumas. We don't all have the same traumas, but there's not one human being on this planet who has not come through trauma. And we are the survivors of that, right? And so we all need this help. We all need this community. We all need these discussions. But I love speaking to the specific needs in this community, because there's so little available, right? There's so little available for, you know, I think for Black people in America. And I'll also shout out Brazil. I saw a few of my friends from Brazil on the chat as well. And even, you know, that's another experience that I'd love to bring to this discussion, because, you know, the ability to continue to create and be and thrive, you know, that's what we want. We want to thrive. We want the greatest amount of joy that can come out of this life. And if part of that's going to come through building community, and in building community, telling people, yo, this thing made me cry, and that doesn't make me less of a man. In fact, my vulnerability makes me sexy, right? Like, I want to get that t-shirt, Joe. I saw you wearing one. Like, can you make those available? Because I want a vulnerability is the new sexy t-shirt, and I'm gonna wear that every day.
I'm working on it, brother. Working on it.
Make it happen. Make it happen. But
Put that on your to-do list, man.
but what I want to say, because we're coming to a close, and I know folks have a busy day ahead, is I'm certain now, having had this conversation, that this is the first of many. That all of these gentlemen have so much more wisdom and experience to share, and so I will be sharing out their information in their LinkedIn profile, so that you can add them to the list of people that you follow, because each one in their own right is an expert, a griot, a storyteller, and someone who deserves to be part of and to be a benefit to your community. And so I just want to thank you, Salithio, Corey, Joe, for making this happen, for trusting me to not, you know, completely take advantage of your vulnerability, but leverage it as a way to build community. And thank you for bringing everything that you brought to this conversation, because I know that people, we need this, man. We need the healing as a people, as a community, as a human race. We need the healing. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
welcome. Yeah, thanks for having me. Thank you. Thank you. Thank y'all, brothers, man. It was a pleasure, man. I enjoyed it. And
Likewise.
Corey, man, keep up the work, bro. Keep up the good work. You too, brother Joe. I think that
Yeah.
one of the number one problems we do have in our community is that we don't understand trauma, and that's where the programming that we're bringing in. That's what we're addressing our crime in our community as trauma. We create the violence that's in our community. We addressing it as trauma. So yeah, I agree 100%, 100%. Like that we inherited a bunch of stuff.
Yep.
All right, y'all. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna close us out, and then we'll get this going again at some point. But thank you, and everybody who joined us. Have a great day. Please message me if you have any conversations, and I promise to share Corey, Salithio, and Joe's information with you so that you can add them to your community as well.